December 19th, 1944. Verdun, France. Inside a cold stone barracks that once housed French soldiers in the First World War, Supreme Allied Commander General Dwight D. Eisenhower stands over a table covered in maps. Outside, snow falls steadily. The temperature is below freezing. Around him, the most powerful military commanders in the European theater sit in silence, staring at something none of them expected to see: a massive bulge in the Allied front line. The Germans have launched their largest offensive since D-Day. 3 Panzer Army, 250,000 men, driving west through the Ardennes forest, splitting the American line in half. And in the middle of that bulge, completely surrounded, are 18,000 American paratroopers of the 101st Airborne Division, trapped in a Belgian town called Bastogne, cut off, low on ammunition. No resupply possible. The Germans have demanded their surrender. Eisenhower looks around the room and asks the only question that matters: who can counterattack? Who can relieve Bastogne before it falls? The room is silent. Then, from the corner, a voice. Sharp, confident. General George S. Patton, I can have 3 divisions moving north in 48 hours. Eisenhower looks at him. Patton's Third Army is currently fighting 90 miles south, pushing toward Germany. To disengage from combat, turn 90 degrees, march through a blizzard, and attack in 48 hours is not just difficult. According to every manual, every doctrine, every military textbook ever written, it is impossible. Eisenhower's response is 2 words that would define their entire relationship. Don't be fatuous, George. If you're here because you want to know the untold stories of World War II, the moments that changed everything, the decisions made under impossible pressure, then you're in the right place. This is WW2 Elite, and we bring you the history they don't teach in school. Hit that subscribe button right now, because what you're about to hear is one of the most extraordinary military operations in history. And if you make it to the end, you'll understand why Eisenhower later called it one of the most brilliant exhibitions of generalship in the entire war. Eisenhower stares at Patton. The room is silent. Every officer present knows what Patton is suggesting. Third Army is engaged along a 100-mile front south of Luxembourg, fighting German forces entrenched in the Siegfried Line. Patton wants to pull 3 full divisions out of that fight, turn them north, and drive them nearly 100 miles through winter conditions to attack the southern flank of the German penetration. A staff officer steps forward with a map. Sir, Third Army's current... He points to the Saar region, southeast of Luxembourg. Bastogne is here. The officer's finger moves northeast. That's approximately 75 miles for the closest units, closer to 90 or 95 for others. Eisenhower studies the map. Wait, you're currently engaged south of Luxembourg. Bastogne that's what, 75 miles north? The staff officer nods. Closer to 90 for some units, sir. Eisenhower looks back at Patton. And you can disengage from active combat, turn your entire army 90 degrees, march through a blizzard, and attack in 48 hours. Patton doesn't hesitate. Yes, sir. The room is still silent. Field Marshal Bernard Montgomery, commanding Allied forces in the north, shakes his head slightly. General Omar Bradley, Patton's immediate superior, leans back in his chair, arms crossed. Eisenhower's voice is slow, deliberate. Don't be fatuous, George. Fatuous. It means foolish, silly, absurd. It's not just skepticism, it's dismissal. But Patton doesn't react. He simply looks at Eisenhower and waits, because Patton has already made up his mind. And he's already done something that will either save the entire Western Front or destroy his career. Let's be clear about what Patton is proposing. He wants to move 3 divisions: the 4th Armored Division, the 26th Infantry Division, the 80th Infantry Division. That's over 133,000 men, 11,000 vehicles, 600 tanks, thousands of trucks carrying ammunition, fuel, medical supplies, field kitchens. He wants to pull them out of active combat, where they are currently engaged with German forces, turn them 90 degrees to the north, and march them an average of 80 to 100 miles, depending on their starting positions, through snow, through ice, on roads designed for medieval carts, now expected to carry 40-ton Sherman tanks in December. In the Ardennes, where temperatures are dropping below zero and forecasts predict 18 inches of snow in the next 48 hours, and he wants to do this in 2 days. Normal U.S. Army doctrine for this kind of operation: disengaging from combat, reorienting an entire army, and redeploying for offensive action, calls for 3 to 4 weeks, minimum. Patton is saying 2 days. Eisenhower knows the numbers. Bradley knows the numbers. Every officer in that room knows the numbers. It should be impossible. But Patton isn't looking at doctrine. He's looking at the map. And he's already started moving. The conference ends. Officers file out into the snow. Eisenhower motions for Patton to stay behind. The two men stand alone in the cold room. Eisenhower's voice is quieter now, but there's an edge to it. George, I need a realistic timetable. The men at Bastogne are surrounded. Every hour counts. But I can't have you promising miracles and failing. Patton meets his eyes. Ike, when have I ever failed to deliver? Eisenhower, you're talking about moving 3 divisions in winter through enemy territory. Army doctrine says this takes weeks. You're saying 2 days? Patton's response is immediate. Army doctrine doesn't win wars. Speed does. Audacity does. Eisenhower's voice hardens. If you fail, Bastogne falls. If Bastogne falls, the entire northern flank collapses. This isn't Sicily where you can improvise. This is the entire Allied position in Europe. Patton's voice is calm. I'm not improvising. I've already started. Eisenhower stops. What? Patton continues. I knew you'd ask for a counterattack. I had my staff draw up 3 We've already issued preliminary movement orders. The men are packing right now. Eisenhower's face goes cold. You moved divisions before I gave the order? Patton shakes his head. I prepared divisions. There's a difference. You give the word right now, and we roll at dawn. You don't, and it was just an exercise. Eisenhower stares at him. This is exactly the kind of thing that, Patton, you realize if this backfires, I can't protect you. Patton's voice is steady. I'll be in Bastogne before you need to. The 2 men stand in silence. Finally, Eisenhower speaks. 48 hours, George, not 49. Patton salutes and walks out into the snow. According to Martin Blumentson's The Patton Papers, Patton wrote in his diary that night, "This time the Kraut stuck his head in a meat grinder, and I've got hold of the handle." Eisenhower's diary entry for December 19th reads, Patton's proposal is ambitious to the point of recklessness, but both men knew something else. The men at Bastogne didn't have weeks. They didn't even have days. If someone didn't reach them soon, they would be overrun. December 20th dawn. 3rd Army begins to move. The 4th Armored Division, currently engaged with German forces near the town of Saarbrücken, receives orders to disengage and move north. But disengaging from combat isn't like flipping a switch. You can't just pull back when the enemy is shooting at you. Tank battalions have to execute fighting withdrawals, covering each other as they pull off the line. Infantry units have to hand their positions over to reserve forces who aren't moving north. Artillery batteries have to pack up their guns, which are dug into frozen ground, and all of this has to happen under fire. The Germans don't stop shooting just because you're leaving. By mid-morning, the first reports come in. It's chaos. Tank columns stretching for 50 miles, traffic jams at every crossroads, roads that were never designed for this kind of traffic. A single broken-down truck can block an entire battalion, and the weather's getting worse. Colonel Halley Maddox, Patton's Deputy Chief of Staff, radios from the field. Sir, the 80th Infantry Division reports they're gridlocked south of Arlon. Estimated delay 6 to 8 hours. Patton's response is immediate. Tell them to drive through the fields. I don't care if they plow through every farm in Luxembourg. Maddox hesitates. Sir, the ground is frozen. Patton's voice is sharp. Then it'll hold the weight. Move. The columns push forward. Tanks drive through farmland, crushing fences, tearing up fields. Trucks follow, churning the snow into mud. Patton is everywhere. He drives his jeep up and down the columns, stopping at traffic jams, shouting at officers, personally directing traffic. At one point he finds a major standing next to a column of tanks that has stopped to wait for orders. Patton gets out of his jeep. Why are you stopped? The major salutes. Sir, we're waiting for reconnaissance reports on the route ahead. Patton stares at him. The route ahead is north. That's your reconnaissance. Move. The tanks start moving again, but Patton has a bigger problem. By pulling 3 divisions out of the line, he's created a 40-mile gap in 3rd Army's front. 40 miles of open terrain that the Germans could exploit if they realize what's happening. And they're starting to realize. German reconnaissance aircraft spot the movement. Panzer divisions on 3rd Army's eastern flank begin probing the line, testing for weaknesses. On December 21st, just after midnight, General Omar Bradley calls Patton from his headquarters in Luxembourg City. George, I'm looking at a hole in your line you could drive an entire panzer corps through. Patton's voice is calm. They won't. They're too busy running from the north. Bradley's voice rises. You don't know that. You've gambled your entire army position on reaching Patton doesn't hesitate. Yes, sir, I have. There's a pause. Bradley speaks again. Eisenhower's getting nervous. He's asking for progress reports every 4 hours. Patton's response is immediate. Tell Ike the 4th Armored is 30 miles from Bastogne. We'll be there tomorrow. Bradley's voice is flat. You better be, because if you're not, this whole thing falls apart. Patton hangs up. He walks to the map table in his command post. His staff officers are there, tracking unit movements with pins and markers. The 4th Armored is making good progress. The 26th and 80th Infantry Divisions are slower, moving on foot through the snow, but they're moving. Patton looks at the map for a long moment. Then he speaks to his Chief of Staff, Brigadier General Hobart Gay. Get me a chaplain. Gay looks confused. Sir? Patton points to the snow falling outside. I need a prayer for good weather. Gay hesitates. A prayer, sir. Patton's voice is firm. A prayer. I want every man in this army to have a copy by tomorrow morning. Gay nods and leaves. The next day, December 22nd, every soldier in 3rd Army receives a small card with a prayer on it. It reads in part, Almighty and most merciful Father, we humbly beseech thee, of thy great goodness, to restrain these immoderate rains with which we have had to contend. Grant us fair weather for battle, December 22nd. Morning. The weather is not improving. Blizzard conditions. Visibility near zero. The advance has slowed. At a crossroads 10 miles south of Bastogne, a column of Sherman tanks from the 4th Armored Division sits idling. Tank commanders are out of their vehicles, arguing about which route to take. One is shorter but narrower. The other is longer but wider. They can't decide. A jeep pulls up. Patton gets out. He walks over to the group of officers. What's the problem? A captain salutes. Sir, we're trying to determine the best route to Bastogne. This road here is faster, but it's not rated for heavy armor. This road is safer, but it adds 3 miles. Patton looks at the map for exactly 2 seconds. You see that road? He points to the shorter route. That goes to Bastogne. You're taking it. The captain hesitates. Sir, that's not on the map as a main route. Patton's voice is cold. It is now. Move. The tanks start moving again. But while Patton is pushing his army north, the situation at Supreme Headquarters is becoming critical. Eisenhower's Chief of Staff, General Walter Bedell Smith, receives a report from aerial reconnaissance. Sir, Patton's movement is visible from the air. The Germans know he's coming. They're repositioning armor to block him. Eisenhower looks at the map. How far is he from Bastogne? Smith checks the latest report. The lead elements of 4th Armored are approximately 12 miles south, but they're encountering heavy resistance. Eisenhower is silent for a moment. Then he asks the only question that matters. Can he make it in time? Smith doesn't answer immediately. Finally, he speaks. I don't know, sir. Inside Bastogne, the situation is desperate. The 101st Airborne Division, along with elements of other units that got trapped in the encirclement, numbers around 18,000 men. They've been surrounded since December 20th. German forces have cut all roads into the town. Supply drops by air are limited because of the weather. Artillery and medical supplies are almost gone. The wounded are being treated in cellars and basements because the hospitals are full. On December 22nd, German officers approach the American lines under a flag of truce. They deliver a typed message to Brigadier General Anthony McAuliffe, acting commander of the 101st. The message demands surrender. It warns that if the Americans do not surrender, the German forces will annihilate them. McAuliffe reads the message. He thinks for a moment. Then he gives his response. One word: nuts. The German officers don't understand. They ask for clarification. An American officer explains. It means go to hell. The Germans leave. The battle continues. But inside Bastogne, no one knows if help. Radio contact with higher headquarters is sporadic. They have no idea that Patton is 12 miles away. They have no idea that over 133,000 men are racing north to reach them. They only know that they're surrounded, running out of ammunition, and the Germans are attacking again. December 23rd. Patton's lead units are within 10 miles of Bastogne, but they've hit something no one planned for. Heavy German resistance. Dug-in Panther and Tiger tanks. Anti-tank guns position. The Germans know that if Patton breaks through, the entire encirclement collapses. They're throwing everything they have at him. Combat Command B of the 4th Armored Division reports they're facing an entire panzer battalion in defensive positions. The advance has stopped. At 3rd Army headquarters, the mood is tense. Staff officers gather round the radio, listening to reports from the front. We're taking heavy fire. We can't advance without infantry support. We need artillery. Patton listens for a moment. Then he walks to the radio. Get me Colonel Abrams. A moment later, a voice comes through. Lieutenant Colonel Creighton Abrams, commanding officer of the 37th Tank Battalion. Abrams here, sir. Patton's voice is calm. Creighton, how close are you to Bastogne? Abrams responds, approximately 6 miles, sir. We're encountering heavy resistance at Eisenhower. Patton speaks slowly. I need you to break through. Tonight. Abrams pauses. Sir, we're facing dug-in armor. We'll take heavy casualties if we attack without. Patton's voice doesn't change. I know. But the men in Bastogne don't have time. You're going tonight. There's a long pause. Then Abrams responds, yes, sir, we'll get through. But at this same moment, something else is happening. Radio contact with Bastogne has gone dark. The 101st Airborne hasn't transmitted a signal in over 12 hours. At 3rd Army headquarters, staff officers begin to fear the worst. Has Bastogne fallen? At Supreme Headquarters, General Bradley speaks with Eisenhower. We have to consider the possibility that Patton is advancing toward a position that's already fallen. Eisenhower's voice is quiet. How far is he? Bradley checks the map. 6 miles. But he's encountering heavy resistance. He stopped. Eisenhower stares at the map. Stopped? Bradley nods. The 4th Armored can't advance without taking heavy casualties. Eisenhower doesn't respond immediately. Finally he speaks. Tell Patton to keep moving, whatever it takes. Because if Bastogne has fallen, this entire operation is for nothing. December 24th, Christmas Eve. Aerial reconnaissance finally gets through the weather. The report comes back. Bastogne has not fallen. American positions are still holding, but they're running out of time. The Germans are preparing for a final assault. Supplies are critically. The wounded are dying because there's no medicine. If Patton doesn't break through in the next 24 hours, it won't matter. At 3rd Army headquarters, Patton receives the reconnaissance report. He reads it, then he looks at his staff. We're attacking tonight. An officer speaks up. Sir, it's Christmas Eve. The men have been marching for 4 days straight. They're exhausted. Patton's voice is sharp. The men in Bastogne are exhausted too. And they're surrounded. We're attacking tonight. Another officer speaks. Sir, the 4th Armored is still 6 miles out. They'll have to attack in the dark, through German lines. Patton looks at him. Then they better bring flashlights. The staff is silent. Patton turns to his operations officer. Get me Abrams again. December 26th. 4:45 p.m. Lieutenant Colonel Creighton Abrams, 37th Tank Battalion, after 2 days of continuous combat, smashes through the final German defensive line at the village of Bastogne. 5 Sherman tanks from C Company, led by Lieutenant Charles Bulge, break through and race toward Bastogne. At 4:50 p.m., Bulge's tank crosses into the perimeter held by the 101st Airborne. The siege is broken. The encirclement is lifted. Total time from the Verdun Conference to the relief of Bastogne, 156 hours. Patton promised to begin the attack in 48 hours. He attacked on December 22nd, 72 hours after the conference. But here's what no one fully understood until later. Patton had moved his entire army, 1,333,178 men, 11,178 vehicles, 622 tanks, an average of 75 to 100 miles, disengaging from active combat, reorienting 90 degrees and launching a coordinated offensive. In 6 days, 1947, 91, 80 coordinated, 1997 BC. What is very important of this is that accord on a movie that is devoted to be a Tesla, 1980. The Tesla has no developed in the middle of the worst winter storm in 50 years. Military analysts would later calculate that this movement, by every standard of military doctrine, should have taken 4 to 6 weeks. Patton did it in less than a week, and he succeeded. But the story doesn't end there, because 2 days later, on December the 28th, 1944, Eisenhower personally visits Patton's headquarters in Luxembourg City. The 2 men meet in Patton's command tent. The tent is cold. A small stove provides minimal heat. Maps cover every surface. Patton is standing at a table reviewing casualty reports when Eisenhower walks in. Patton salutes. Eisenhower returns the salute. Then he speaks. George, I owe you an apology. Patton looks surprised. Sir? Eisenhower steps closer. When you said 48 hours, I called you. Patton's expression doesn't change. You said don't be fatuous. There's a difference. Eisenhower allows himself a slight smile. I didn't think it could be done. No one did. Bradley thought you'd overextended. Montgomery said it was tactically impossible. Patton's response is immediate. Montgomery thinks everything is impossible. Eisenhower continues. The staff calculated you moved 133,000 men, 11,000 vehicles, and 600 tanks in 6 days. They're calling it the largest military movement in combat history. Patton shrugs. It was simple. I just told the men where to go. Eisenhower's voice becomes serious. You started moving before I gave the order. You prepared those plans before the Bastogne conference. Patton pauses. Then he speaks. Yes, sir. Eisenhower's voice is quiet. You know that's a court-martial offense, moving army units without authorization. Patton meets his eyes. Would you have preferred I wait and let Bastogne fall? The tent is silent. Outside, snow is falling again. Eisenhower looks at the map. He's silent for a long moment. Then he speaks. No, I wouldn't have. Eisenhower walks to the tent entrance, looks out at the snow, then turns back. You know what bothers me most, George? You were right about the speed, about the audacity, about all of it. When I said don't be fatuous, you proved that sometimes fatuous is exactly what wins wars. Patton doesn't respond. Eisenhower continues. I'm a planner, George. I coordinate. I build coalitions. I make sure everyone is on the same page before we move. That's how you command a multinational force. That's how you keep the alliance together. But you don't wait. You don't coordinate. You see what needs to be done, and you do it. And at Bastogne, your way worked. Patton speaks quietly. My way doesn't always work. Eisenhower nods. No, it doesn't. But this time it saved an entire division. Maybe more. Historians will probably say it saved the entire northern flank. Maybe. So I'm here to say thank you. And to tell you that I was wrong. The two men stand in silence. Finally, Patton speaks. Ike, you weren't wrong to doubt me. What I promised was impossible. By every rule we know, it shouldn't have worked. Eisenhower looks at him. Then why did it? Patton thinks for a moment. Because the men didn't know it was impossible. I didn't tell them. The doctrine said it would take 4 weeks. I told them we were moving in 2 days. And they believed me. Eisenhower nods slowly. That's leadership, George. That's what wins wars. Patton's voice is quiet. So is what you do, Ike. You hold this whole thing together. Without you, there is no alliance. Without you, we're not even here. I can move an army fast. But you move nation. We need both. This moment, this conversation, captured something fundamental about military command. Eisenhower represented the strategic mind, the diplomat, the planner who saw the entire theater and coordinated the movements of millions. Patton represented the tactical warrior, the aggressive fighter who believed that speed and audacity could overcome any obstacle. Neither man was wrong, and neither could have won the war alone. Eisenhower needed someone willing to do the impossible. Patton needed someone willing to let him try, and at Bastogne both men played their roles perfectly. Eisenhower gave, Patton executed it, and 18,000 American soldiers survived because of it. The relief of Bastogne marked the turning point of the Battle of the Bulge. By January 25, 1945, the German offensive was completely defeated. The Wehrmacht had suffered catastrophic losses, over 100,000 casualties, thousands of tanks and vehicles destroyed. It was the last major German offensive of the war. After Bastogne, the Germans would never again launch a strategic attack in the West. Patton's Third Army suffered 17,000 casualties during the Bastogne operation, 17,000 men killed, wounded, or missing, but military historians estimate that the rapid relief prevented an additional 40,000 Allied casualties. If Bastogne had fallen, the entire northern flank would have collapsed. The war might have lasted months longer. The cost in lives would have been. Patton's gamble saved lives. And it worked because he was willing to risk everything on speed. The movement of Third Army from the Saar to Bastogne is still taught today at the United States Military Academy at West Point. It's studied at every major military staff college in the world. It's considered one of the greatest examples of rapid force reorientation in military history. The numbers are staggering. 133,178 men, 11,178 vehicles, 622 tanks, an average movement of 75 to 100 miles per unit. Disengaging from active combat, reorienting 90 degrees, conducting offensive operations, all in in winter. Previous U.S. Army doctrine estimated that such a movement would require a minimum of 3 to 4 weeks. Patton did it in less than a week, and he did it while fighting the weather, the terrain, and the German army. Years later, Eisenhower would write in his memoir, Crusade in Europe, quote, "The speed with which Patton changed the direction of his forces and sent them into effective action was one of the most brilliant exhibitions of generalship during World War II." Coming from Eisenhower, a man known for careful, measured statements, this was extraordinary praise, because Eisenhower understood something that many people didn't. Patton's success at Bastogne wasn't just about moving fast. It was about understanding what the situation required and having the courage to do it, even when everyone said it was impossible. Eisenhower called Patton fatuous, foolish, absurd. And in that moment, Eisenhower was applying the logic of doctrine, of planning, of what should be possible. But Patton wasn't thinking about what should be possible. He was thinking about what needed to happen. And sometimes those are two different things. After the war, Patton kept a framed map of the Bastogne relief operation in his office. The map showed the route Third Army took from the Saar to Bastogne, the positions of every division, the timeline of the advance, and written across the top, in Patton's own handwriting, were 5 words. They said it couldn't be done. They were wrong. Patton never lost his confidence. He never doubted his ability to accomplish the impossible. And that confidence, that absolute certainty that he could do what others said was impossible, was both his greatest strength and his greatest flaw. It got him in trouble throughout his career, but at Bastogne, it saved 18,000 men. George Patton died on December 21, 1945, almost exactly 1 year after the Bastogne operation began. He was injured in a car accident in Germany. He was paralyzed from the neck down. He died 12 days later from complications. He never returned home. He was buried in Luxembourg, among the soldiers of Third Army who died in the Battle of the Bulge. Thousands of soldiers attended his funeral. General Omar Bradley gave. General Dwight D. Eisenhower attended and placed his own 4-star general's insignia on Patton's casket. Eisenhower never publicly explained why he did that. He didn't need to. Everyone understood. Patton had been difficult. He had been controversial. He had violated orders, ignored protocol, and acted on his own initiative more times than anyone could count. But he had also been brilliant. And at Bastogne, he had proven that sometimes the impossible is exactly what needs to be done. So when you hear the story of Bastogne, remember this. It wasn't just about the 101st Airborne holding the line. It wasn't just about the weather clearing on December 23rd so that supplies could be dropped. It wasn't just about Lieutenant Colonel Creighton Abrams breaking through at Assun, and it was about a general who heard the word impossible and responded, "Watch me." It was about a supreme commander who had the wisdom to let him try, and it was about 133,000 soldiers who marched through a blizzard because their commander told them it could be done. They didn't know it was impossible. And because they didn't know, they did it. That's the lesson of Bastogne. Not that the impossible can be done, but that sometimes not knowing something is impossible is the only way to accomplish it. December 19th, 1944. Eisenhower says, "Don't be fatuous, George." December 26, 1944. Patton's tanks roll into Bastogne. December 28th, 1944. Eisenhower admits Patton was right. And in that admission, in that moment of a supreme commander acknowledging that aggression and speed and audacity had won the day, you see the heart of what made the Allied victory possible. 2 men, 2 styles of leadership, 2 ways of thinking about war. And when it mattered most, they both did exactly what they needed to do. If this story showed you something you didn't know about World War II, if it gave you a new perspective on leadership, on courage, on what's possible when everything says it isn't, then do me a favor. Subscribe to WW2 Elite right now. Hit that like button, leave a comment and tell me what you think. Because there are hundreds of stories like this. Stories of impossible decisions, of men who refused to accept defeat, of moments that changed the course of history. And we're going to tell every single one of them. This is WW2 Elite. This is history, the way it actually, and we're just getting started.